Thank you. I would like to tell you a story, and I'm going to ask for your help here. I need you to imagine yourself as one of the characters in the story. It won't take long. You're only in the prologue. So here we are, several billion years ago, floating in the primordial soup of a planet teeming with all the right ingredients, especially you. You're just a single molecule, but you're the first molecule on our planet whose chemical structure allows it to make new copies of itself. And because of this particular ability, you will go on to become the ancestor of every living organism that will ever occupy the face of the earth. Every koala bear, every bacterium, every mushroom, every man, woman, and child. Those are your descendants. So congratulations. Now you're done imagining yourself in the story. There is an interesting fitting analogy between this event, the very origin of life itself, and the origin of modern scientific Darwinism. On the one hand, your creation, caused by two non-living molecules that would eventually give rise to all of us, and on the other hand, two scientific theories, which once brought together would finally allow us to understand the process that got us from that one molecule, that was you, to the diversity of life forms that we see all around us today. So what are these two scientific theories, these two domains of inquiry? The first, you may have guessed, is the theory of evolution by natural selection. Best idea ever, says Dan Dennett, who knows a thing or two about good ideas. The basic concept, evolution by natural selection, is as long as you have variation in traits that cause differentiation in the ability to survive or reproduce, then you will get evolution. That, I'm inclined to agree with Dan Dennett, is a great idea. It took us billions of years to figure it out, and when one of us finally did, two of us did. Charles Darwin is the one that we associate with the idea today, and he's rightly credited with coming up with the idea. He did. He worked on it for about 20 years, doing the field work, detective work over in the Galapagos, and then working out some of the finer details back at his estate in England. And it actually took him less than 20 years to figure it out, but he recognized that some of the implications of the theory would be upsetting to a lot of people. And so he sat on the theory, he sat on the data for a long time, for years and years, until one day went out to his mailbox and found a letter from this other guy, Alfred Russel Wallace. And what Alfred Russel Wallace had done independently was recognize the same principles that Darwin had worked out over a period of 20 years, then inadvertently threatened to destroy Darwin's life's work by writing him a letter about this important discovery. Well, all is well that ends well, and they agreed to present the theory together as a joint discovery. So they did that. As wonderful as the theory was, though, it was decidedly incomplete. Because you don't understand biology unless you understand evolution. And you don't understand evolution unless you understand inheritance. Enter Gregor Mendel, easily one of the 10 most famous Austrian monks of all time. This is a man who spent his free time getting pea plants to reproduce for his entertainment. Let that be a lesson on the effects of lifelong celibacy, people. Okay? One of the ideas that we associate with Mendel is this recessive and dominant inheritance. It turns out that that's not very important. That doesn't account for much of the determination of our traits. But that doesn't matter, because Mendel's truly important idea was that inheritance is a digital process, that you get this part from your dad, this part from your mom, as opposed to some sort of blending together of trait pigments. And so if you were to zoom in on, let's say, the paternal copy of the 6th chromosome in one cell in my pancreas right now, and in that chromosome find the HLA-DR-beta1 gene, you would find that it is exactly identical in its chemical structure to that same gene in the right eyeball of my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. May she rest in peace. And that's the important thing. The genes get passed down with integrity from generation to generation. They don't get diluted. So you have these two ideas, what we call particulate inheritance, that it doesn't get diluted, and the theory of evolution by natural selection. And in retrospect, they go very well together. But it wasn't appreciated in the lifetime of Darwin or Wallace or Mendel. Nobody really realized it until about 50 years later that these things would go well together. And in fact, they were seen as competing theories trying to account for the nature of living things. But eventually, a handful of biologists in the early 20th century recognized that they were more complementary than contradictory theories. And when they put them together, worked perfectly, like a key sliding into a lock. And what was behind the door? I will show you. This is a sample of the disciplines that owe their very existence to this synthesis of two theories, what we call the modern synthesis. I just have them listed alphabetically here. But I want to draw your attention in particular to the second one on the list, evolutionary psychology, as this is my own discipline. It is the study of human nature. It's the attempt to identify our evolved genetic predispositions and the specific environmental inputs that activate them. In order to tell you a little bit more about evolutionary psychology, though, I'd like to contrast it with traditional approaches in the field of psychology and traditional applications of the theory of evolution. So psychology, throughout most of its history, has either explicitly or implicitly treated the mind of a newborn baby as a blank slate. There's nothing there yet. Or if there's anything there from evolution, it's just this very general ability to absorb whatever you happen to be exposed to. So basically a blank slate that is impinged upon by the way your parents treat you, by the media vaguely defined, by the society at large. And if you're into behaviorist principles, you emphasize the importance of every reinforcing or punishing event throughout your life in determining the sort of person you become by the time you reach adulthood. So that's psychology without evolution. It can be done, but you're missing out on some important information that will influence the direction of your research. What about evolution? Well, with evolution, we can account for all sorts of beautiful things out there. You can account for camouflage. It's very useful, whether you're prey or predator. It helps you survive if you have some camouflage. Can account also for the peacock, which is surprising because that appears to be the exact opposite of camouflage. And in fact, the bright coloration of the peacock and its large showy tail is in fact an impediment to its survival, but it's not the peacock's survival that matters. It's the survival of the peacock's genes, if you get where I'm going with this. From a genetic perspective, survival is really only useful insofar as it gives you more opportunities to copulate. And if there are any peahens in the audience, I'm sure you'll agree with me that this peacock is all about sex. Antlers, also useful, very good for defending yourself or attacking other members of your own species. But what is that competition all about, really? If you haven't figured that out, ask the peacock. He knows what's going on there. What about humans? Humans are products of evolution, right? Sure we are. We came down from the trees. We have bipedal stance now. We have these huge brains. We have opposable thumbs. We can do this. We can pick up stuff and throw it at a moving piece of meat and then carry it back to the campsite. So yeah, sure, we're products of evolution. Right. What about the human mind? Well, the human mind was sort of off limits for a long time. People who were working in evolution didn't want to understand or attempt to understand evolution of the human mind. People working in psychology, the study of the human mind, weren't so interested in bringing evolution to light. But that is exactly what evolutionary psychology does. It takes the mind that has historically been treated as a black box and looks inside to see what's really going on inside the box. And it's not a blank slate, and it's not a sponge. It's really more of a Swiss Army knife, a very complicated Swiss Army knife with numerous evolved adaptations, each serving one particular function corresponding to an adaptive problem that was faced by our ancestors over the course of human evolutionary history. So these are all shaped by millions of years of evolution, not so much by the immediate environment or the modern world. So for example, we have phobias of snakes and of spiders more than we have phobias of firearms and of tequila and of downed power lines and automobiles, things that are more likely to kill us in the modern environment. And we have sweet tooth as well. It's positively maladaptive in the modern world to have this craving for donuts and cheesecake and candy and soda all of the time. But the reason we've inherited that preference is that's what kept our ancestors alive through the next famine, if they were able to gain a little bit of weight beforehand. So it doesn't work so well in the modern environment, but it makes sense that we've inherited it because it was adaptive for so many generations reliably. Now, back up there. It's not just the benefits to survival. Remember that peacock. We also have adaptations related to mate selection and all domains of mating. And among these is the preference for mates who are fertile. How do we detect that? We detect that from the morphology, the shape of their face, the shape of their body. And much as we like to emphasize, and as interesting as it is, to look at the cross-cultural variation in the things that people want, the things that people enjoy, I think really the similarities tell the most important part of the story in this case. Humans everywhere are attracted to signs of health and youth and fertility, not to signs of disease and frailty, right? Because it's only the tendency to be attracted to signs of fertility that is able to pass itself on. And therefore, we're very interested in these signs of fertility in other people's faces and bodies. We like them a lot. Babies, 6 weeks old, find attractive the same adult faces that we do. They didn't get that way by reading too many beauty magazines, right? So we can explain the mating psychology of humans, as well as those things that are related to our survival, such as the phobia of snakes and spiders. And this is just a handful of some of the areas within psychology that we now understand much more clearly, thanks to it's about 25 years of the evolutionary approach in the field of psychology now. And I'm not going to go through these one by one. Just take a look at the list. And I want to just close by looking at where we stand right now. We've figured out a lot in a relatively short period of time. And it's a remarkable thing, really. You think about it, that you, the very product of natural selection, are able to understand it, to recognize the influence it has on your every thought, fear, and desire, and to explain that to a room of your fellow human beings or to a single curious child. I'm not the first to observe that this is an amazing time to be alive when we've finally figured out all of this stuff and we understand how the world works. But just recognize that this is not anything new, that this feeling has been around every generation for thousands and thousands of years, people thinking now we finally understand how things work, right? But there are details, not just details, but important facts yet to be worked out. Facts stranger and more beautiful than we can yet imagine, but that we will discover, and that we will discover all the sooner if we encourage in ourselves and in each other a thirst for scientific discovery. Thank you.